Hello, everybody. Today I'm sitting down with my good friend Sebastian. He runs the Redeemed House Facebook page that many of you may have seen. It's one of my favorite pages, actually, one of my favorite people that I've met online. How are you today, Sebastian?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
It's good that this is take two of this interview, actually, because the first time there was a lot of technical difficulties and we didn't end up publishing it. So hopefully this time goes much better because I really liked what you had to say last time, so I think people will be very interested to hear it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to give you a repeat of last time.
Oh
I
no,
was on
that's
a roll
fine.
that even my buddy
Yeah.
was in the corner, like, yeah, that's good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you get me at the end of a work day this go around, and it's
Hmm.
I've just been pushing. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to do it again and again and again, or however many times you want me to or need to. And it's just it's an incredible blessing
Yeah,
to be able to sit down with a brother and to just let everybody know what I'm about and what I got going on. So fantastic opportunity for me, and so I thank you for that.
you're absolutely welcome. So I actually don't know too much about what's going on down in West Virginia. Um, most people don't put too, especially in this community, right? They don't put too much of their private, personal stuff on the internet, which is
Sure,
probably a good idea.
sure, that'd be wise.
I know that you guys have a fellowship of some kind down there, which is super exciting. It looks like
Yes,
it's pretty big, actually.
yes. Very excited about it. That's I guess one subject of conversation is Appalachian Families of the Way.
Hmm.
Fantastic group of people. Um, Number of months ago, they asked me to speak there, and so I delivered a message there, and then basically, but I was always pushing because I know that we have all these different arguments about headship and eldership,
Hmm.
and those are definitely conversations that we need to have. But unfortunately, I'm not sure that we're at a stage of spiritual maturity where we could start. Like, let me put it this way: um, if the Father designates you into a spiritual role, then you as the individual know that you must accomplish that role, you must fill that role, you must meet all the responsibilities of that role,
Hmm.
and in so doing, you're spiritually aligned with the will of the Father. So in that regard, um, brothers and sisters that are in right spiritual relationship with the Almighty are going to naturally gravitate towards you if it is in their spiritual role to assist you, or if
Yeah.
it's in their spiritual role to guide you, or if it's in their spiritual role to just get out of your way.
Hmm.
And so, and I noticed the camera did that flicking thing again. Is it too bad this go around?
No, no, it's.
Okay,
I think you said last time it was because you talk with your hands, and I
I
think that's
do,
exactly that's.
I do.
If it only does it once in a while, it's gonna be totally fine.
Right. Okay. Good. Yep. I don't want to get anybody dizzy, and I'm sorry for the mess. So I
It's
crash
okay.
landed here about 5 months ago, and I bought the property 2 years ago, and I've just been working on fixing it up and getting it to the point where it can be a place of solace and a place of refuge for my friends that I've been growing up with for the last 15 years or so in Torah, and uh, and and just ultimately just a place to spread my roots
Mm.
and to focus and to hopefully double my talents or triple my talents that the Father has given me.
Mm.
I arrived here, really, it was just an incredible story. That's a story in and of itself how I ended up with this property. But it was given to me by the Heavenly Father. Um, Everything that I have and that I own has been given to me by the Heavenly Father, and I was prayerfully just asking the Father when I need to transition from Pennsylvania to West Virginia, and I was working a job where I was lifting and moving houses. So I've been lifting and moving houses for about 8 years, and it's a very high stress job. I was very client focused. I was also very workman focused. So I was dealing with a lot of inner issues between the workers, inner issues between management, inner issues between the clients. So it's kind of interesting because the father gave me that role. It was again another gift through a friend. I didn't know this at the time, but one of my best friends, he got in front of his boss's face and he was like, "If you don't hire Sebastian, it's the stupidest thing that you've ever done," you know. And I had no idea. So, I go into this job and they sit down in front of me. It sits down the CEO, and then to the
Mm-hmm.
right of me sits down the treasury, which I thought I was a treasury. What do you think? That's a big deal. But this turns out he was a really big dude, very important guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then to the left was the other partner in the business. And I had a 3 hour long interview with these guys
Oh
because of
wow.
the kind of position that they wanted to put me in. And when I first sat down, I was kind of like, this energy is so wild. And they'd stare at you like two windows into your soul. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Just direct eye contact. And I was like, what's going on here? And what crazy energy, I'm just coming here for a job interview. Like, what are you guys here for? And so, but when they got in, they're putting out this energy. I just pulled myself up to that table and I said, all right, now we're going to find out what this is all about, And so I answered
Yeah.
all their questions. I've been there 8 years, but it was 8 years moving houses for the kings of this earth, man. And I
Mm-hmm.
got my brother-in-law into it. My brother-in-law is Torah observant. Actually, I got him into it before I got my job. I said, "Hey, go with Johnny. Johnny's going to get you a job." And then a couple of years later, I told Johnny, I was like, "Man, I'm getting heavy set, brother. I need to go do something
Mm-hmm.
that's just in the divine masculine. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
just like throwing stuff around, And
Yeah.
he's like, "Hey, you can come work with me." And I was like, "Oh no," because Johnny was a hard worker, man. He was one of the
Yeah.
hardest workers I ever known. And so I was 8 years. We had the Torah observant men in the company because they put us 14, 15 hours in a tool truck, or 11 hours driving to South Carolina or whatever it was. And we'd be sitting in that tool truck and we'd be telling, and it was more John than me when it was like, but I get my trips in New Jersey or whatever. I only went to, I had a little more rank, unfortunately. And so I was able to like kind of sneak my way into jobs that were only like 6 hours away from home or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, and make it back before or whatever. And so I definitely in some ways had the easiest part of the job, and in some ways had the hardest part. But it was crazy. It was a kind of job where um if I made a mistake logistically, the men in the field would suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the men in the field suffered, when they got back and there was debrief, everyone would find out my mistakes. So,
Mm-hmm.
like even my buddy Johnny, that was the one thing about John is like, he just because you were friends, there was no nepotism with the guy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just because you were friends, he wasn't going to hide your sins. So right there in that open office, he'd be like, "Hey, Sebby, you screwed up." And he'd just get into it. And then the owner would come from his office right over and he'd be like, "Hey, did you know you screwed up?" And then the guys in the crew, one by one, "Hey man, you really screwed up. And so that was the thing. It was like we call it baptism by fists. And so that was the company. Now, out of that company, we had a couple of Torah observant men,
Mm-hmm.
and character wise and all that. Some of the guys are just super, and some of them were converts of John, and just because it was a fellowship, between the brothers that were there, that were Torah observant men. People just turned because they just knew, like, oh, this is Sebi, or this is John, or this is Carl, and they just
Mm-hmm.
knew who we were. And so that brought inspiration. And so the whole company, you get a bunch of guys sitting in a tool truck going wherever they're headed. They start talking. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. That's what we came to find out is that, I think in the movement we have this inclination to say, "Oh, we're set apart. We got to be set apart. Like we got to set ourselves apart, right?"
Yeah.
And so, how do we set it? How do we set ourselves apart? We push this guy away because he's too worldly. We push this brother away because he's got too much incorrect doctrine. You got to push this guy away because this and that's other thing. And then there we go, we've achieved holiness, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how it works, because what you've done is you've divided the house. You haven't multiplied the house, you've divided it. Of course
Yeah.
there's going to be a weaker brother there. Of course there's going to be somebody that doesn't have all the right ideas that we're hoping, but the reality is we're individuals, we're not a collectivism. So we're
Mhm.
not a collective. We all have individual inspiration from the Ruach Hakodesh. As it says in the Holy Word, he gives spirit by measure. He gives
Mhm.
every man equal measure of spirit. And so it's up to each man. So King David had equal measure of spirit. I have equal measure of spirit. Jesse has equal measure of spirit. And it's up to each individual to grow that Ruach with the will of the Father, and within the guide rails of Torah, to be able to grow that spirit into a point where you produce good fruit or character, which is the point in
Mhm.
believing any of this, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was amazing because we could see through osmosis how brothers would be joining us, you know.
Mhm.
And so 8 years of very hard labor, my friend, and high stress. In some ways, my brother-in-law, he had to work even harder manually because of his role, and Johnny worked the hardest because he was the foreman, he was the leader. And so,
Mhm.
and I lost my buddy John about 2 years ago. He's my best friend, and so
Oh,
it's
that
kind of how I
sucks.
wound it up. Yeah, thank you. Um, and so I was friends with him for, I don't know, man, over a decade, 12, 13 years, something like that, you know. And
Mhm.
it's funny because the bosses asked him, how long have you known Sebastian? And he says 15 years. That's when I only knew him about 4 years, but it's because we spent every weekend. And when they asked me, I said 7 years, and I was wrong even then because I only knew him for like 4 years at the time. But when he came around to Torah, um he thought I was in a cult. It's funny because I
Mhm.
thought my wife was in a cult, you know.
Mhm.
But I tell you, it's funny when it comes about. Um, Amazing, like it's truly amazing because
Yeah.
you know. Let me back up. So
Mhm.
I was raised eating kosher and keeping the Sabbath day. You know, in fact, that was a lot of rambling. Do you think we could just cut that all out and we start back at the beginning?
That's okay, man.
Is that
That's
just the
the stuff
game?
that people want to hear. Yeah.
All right,
They
that's
want to hear
fine.
about you and
Hey,
the
you do your thing, man. That's fine. Um, I just don't want to sound like a totally incoherent rambling. I've been up since
no.
about 4, but um, I feel like to talk to you like a friend, so I just got to talk to you like my friend, you know. But I was raised in the Baptist church,
Mhm.
and they had me. My parents, they had come to the position that they kept the Sabbath day and they ate kosher,
Mhm.
and that's because my grandfather. And so, you asked me to give my testimony. My testimony is one of faithfulness,
Mhm.
because ultimately I look at my patriarchs in Scripture, but I also look at the patriarchs in my own life, and I
Mhm.
have nothing but to be chained to an attempt at righteousness because of the men that the shoulders I stand on, you know, and so my grandfather on my mother's side, so I'm 100% Cuban.
Mhm.
I know I'm whiter than most Cubans or whatever, and people wonder about that. I don't know why, but my heritage comes from Spain,
Mhm.
and from Spain there was a group of people there that never fully integrated. They're called Castellano. They speak Catalan. They're not really Spaniards.
No.
A lot of them are Sephardic Jews, but
Mhm.
they're actually they never bowed a knee to the crown. They were just always just like a rebellious group of people, goat-keepers. A lot of them were
Mhm.
goat-keepers. I'm a goat-keeper myself, and actually, I got a sick goat that I've been nursing for the last couple of days too. But there's a lot to that in spiritual metaphor, you know, as
Mhm.
we learn these things from the Father. You know, it's the metaphor of the sheep going after that lost sheep. You know, here I have this goat. I have him. He's anemic, so the worms got to him in a couple of days' rain, and so
Mhm.
he's pale underneath the famcha. This is called famcha right here, and so
Mhm.
you look at that to see how much blood cells are your goat has, and if it's pale, if it's white, then they have anemia, which is low iron in the blood, And that's a precursor before they get really sick and die. So
Mm-hmm.
this goat, I have him out, and it's wild and wonderful West Virginia. So this goat's like having a field day, and maybe it's last day, I don't know, but like going into the forest and eating up all this vegetation that it's finding.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took it out of the big pen and just let it like go on, buddy, like just go help, because I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm gonna lose him or keep him. I don't know what's gonna happen. So
Mm-hmm.
um but here he goes. For whatever reason, this freaking goat, man, he just shoots into the deep woods. It just keeps going back there, and I gotta go through the briars and the thorns to find my lost goat. And then when I find him, Brownie, her name is Brownie. So I'm like, where's Brownie at? And so I'm like over here, like working on the dog shed or whatever I'm doing, and I'm like, let me go make sure my goat's fine and the coyotes didn't get her and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I go looking for through the briars and the thorns, and I think about the father, how he goes after that one that was lost. And,
Yeah.
and so, it's interesting because, I hear a lot of testimonies, and it's like, I was delivered from this, or I was delivered from that. I was delivered from this and this other thing. And sometimes the brother that was faithful may not have the most interesting testimony, but
Mm-hmm.
he was faithful. And in some ways, that's what I was given in my life
Mm-hmm.
is just a really good compass of where to go. And so I started out keeping Sabbath as a child. My whole life I kept Sabbath. My
Oh
whole
wow.
life I didn't eat unclean food.
Mm-hmm.
And there was issues though. I mean, so my grandfather, he was in Cuba, and while he was in Cuba, his parents were atheists, humanist atheists. What people don't understand is Cuba was considered a kind of place for intellectuals to gather. It's just a beautiful place, and if you're educated, well learned, you would live in Cuba, or maybe you were Cuban, and so you live in Cuba, and it was this like hub for intellectual thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have the Cubans themselves are very very educated and college educated, and the Americans would come over party on weekends, but they would get pregnant and they go back to the U.S. Well,
Mm-hmm.
abortion was illegal in the U.S., so then they would come back to Cuba to have their abortions. And so all the abortions in the U.S. at one point were just happening in Cuba, and that's actually where my grandfather's father, my great grandfather, that was in his profession, was committing abortions in
Oh
Cuba.
wow.
So obviously they're godless atheists, my
Mm-hmm.
great grandfather and my great grandmother. So my grandfather, when he was raised atheist, and so
Mm-hmm.
him and some friends went to this Pentecostal revival, and they started throwing stones, and every time they throw a stone on the tent, the Pentecostals inside would think it was a movement of the Lord or the Spirit. So they'd start dancing, oh,
Yeah.
praise God, because they get like that's the Spirit, or
Yeah.
whatever. And so my grandfather was getting a kick with his friends about this kind of stuff, and and so him and his friends were throwing stones, and they kept going every night to mess with these idiots. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're believing God. What a bunch of morons, And
Yeah.
so he would go there and he'd throw stones, and there was a movement of the spirit, and then and they just get a kick out of it. But then eventually they put the stones down and they started listening, and when they started listening, they all got saved because
Oh
of some
wow.
Pentecostals there that were holding a tent revival in Cuba. So my grandfather, he went home and he went looking in the library, and it was very commonplace because Cuba's got nice temperatures. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of these buildings are made. They're kind of like a concrete structure, and sometimes they're open in a way, and so water doesn't get in, but so you can build them out. Generationally Cubans, they start out with one house and then they add on, until you have like a compound. and
Mm-hmm.
so um and so like another nice way to leave an inheritance to your children is you just build out, and if your child gets married, then you build them a visitation, and that's kind of how the Cubans were. And so he was in the library, and so they had a library, and he got caught reading the Bible, and so his grandfather beat him. His father beat him.
Oh
My
wow.
grandfather's father beat him. My great grandmother caught him reading the Bible, beat him, and that only strengthened his resolve. So
Hmm.
my grandfather was like, you know, came to the realization like my family's business is blood,
Hmm.
and I'm this is immoral before the Most High God, and did a whole whole whatever 180, right? Turned away from all that and turned away from those things, and instead he got into being like a journalist, because he's very well educated, because his parents always like taught him, to be educated and push that on him, and so he became very educated, and when the communists came to take over Cuba, we have to understand that they weren't actually popular. In fact, when Fidel first showed up, he only showed up with a couple of guys, and they were just, they had their butts kicked, and they just handed right back to them.
Hmm.
But what had happened is the regime before Fidel had confiscated all the guns, so the
Hmm.
populace was unarmed. So when the populace was unarmed and the communists had the guns, when the communists came in, they took over, and when they were taking over, my grandfather, a very brave man, very hard man, very old world, if you understand what I mean by that term.
Hmm.
Um, he started running a newspaper against the regime. So he was like, these communists, it's a religion of the devil, and we're gonna work against it. And so he started running a newspaper to the regime. Well, one night, Fidel's men shows up, and they all surrounded the house. And my uncle, who's still alive to this day, oldest uncle, was with my grandfather. My grandfather answered the door. My grandfather answered the door. Fidel's men shot at him. And when they shot at him, it caught him through the thumb, like right here, like right through the thumb,
Hmm.
came out, and it hit him in the ankle, which he's had walking problems for the rest of his day. He became
Oh
kind of
wow.
like his personality too, because it made his ankle weak. So the only boots that worked for him were like these like military boots. So that was like my grandfather's image right there, man. He had these like really tight, polished, because again, like that old world mentality, like everything's
Yeah.
tight, everything's polished, everything's shiny. These like
Hmm.
shiny little metal boots, like little military boots, man. Because he's not a big guy. Cubans are not big. I'm actually like
Yeah.
one of the bigger Cubans. I'd be a giant by some of the standards of Cubans, but I'm like only 5'7", 5'8", But my
Uh-huh.
grandfather was like small, like 5'5" was big, and but he's a powerful man. Like he's a small guy, but he's powerful. And I'll tell you straight up, like when he was like 76, he was in Miami. This young guy started bullying him because he cut in to get his gas in front of the guy. So he cuts in to get his gas, and this young guy came like tried to wedge himself, and he didn't allow it. And
Hmm.
so this young 45-year-old guy starts trying to bully this like 78-year-old guy, or 72, he might
Oh
have been
man.
72, and he knocked him out, man. He laid him out. One punch just knocked him out. Like none of this nonsense,
Yeah.
knocked him out, and then called my uncle, who's a cop, come deal with this mess I'm in. And so, and then they all came, they dealt with the guy. And, but, I mean, it just shows you the power of the man, because of
Yeah.
the will in the man, and, and so my grandfather, going back to what happened in Cuba, they shot at him and he fell back. I mean, you get shot, dude. It's not like the movies. Like you get
Yeah.
shot, you're like adrenaline's going. So he like slammed the door, but he's like shot, and he's got like, I don't know, 6 or 7 kids plus the wife in the back house. And so
Hmm.
he like gets back and he shuts the door and he's panicked, doesn't know what to do. Here his oldest son comes in and he starts screaming, "Get the machine guns, get the machine guns." They didn't have no machine guns. There was no
Yeah.
machine guns in the house. There was probably one revolver. I think they said there was one revolver, but they had it hidden because Fidel's men would come around and they'd be checking and cutting open stuff and checking for this and that, and they were looking
Hmm.
for his printing press, because
Yeah.
so they would stab his cushions open and look for his printing press, this and that. So that was my grandfather. So after he got shot, his friend said, "Hey, you got to get to the U.S. because you got kids, you got a family. Like you
Hmm.
got to let this go. This is bigger than you." And so my grandfather, his will was to continue the fight, but his love for his family is what prevailed in the situation. So he said, "You're right. I got to go." And now he was ready to die. I mean, I'm telling you, this guy was
Mhm.
like, if you knew my grandfather, man, he's just tough dude.
Mhm.
And but he chose his family, and that was again something that, as I get wrapped up into the things in my life, and what I desire and what I desire to accomplish, I have that example in my life to look back and say, is this going to cost my family?
Yeah.
And so it's like all actions that I've made in my life have been guided by love,
Mhm.
and through that guidance, I've been able to reach um, this position that I'm in, which is highly favored of the Father. I know
Mhm.
him. I feel highly favored. I'm not saying like I'm highly favored. You should do everything I tell you or anything like that. I'm just saying I feel the grace. I feel the blessings. I feel it's flowing to me.
Mhm.
Like there's people that express like that they feel almost like they're just like caged in their lives, and it's sad because it's like
Yeah.
I don't want to speak. um I don't. None of this is something I can ever have. Like I guess what I'm trying to say is nothing that to get to this point. There's nothing that I could have done. There's
Mhm.
nothing that I could have done to get me to this point where I'm at. But now that I'm in this point where I'm at, which has been given to me by the Heavenly Father, because I
Mhm.
asked for it. All I did was ask. Like
Mhm.
I spent 2 years praying about when to make the right time to move down to West Virginia to begin the next phase of what I was hoping was a life for my family and to breed legacy, because the Torah says that it is the act of a righteous man to consider where his children's children are going to grow up, and
Yeah.
I didn't want them growing up in a punk town like I grew up in, and
Yeah.
I didn't want them dealing with all the drugs I was messing with, and the loose women and the unfaithful men and all that. I didn't want them to be part of that,
Yeah.
and so it's like, how do you get to this point? And um, here and there, people they think you either worked hard for it or you did that, did this. I mean, I didn't bury my talents in the dirt, but I'm telling you right now, a lot of this is just favor from the Father that,
Yeah.
that led me to this point where I'm at, and the happiness and the joy that I'm in, the peace that I'm living in right now. You can't tell me, like, you can't shake me. You know what I mean? Like, you can't tell me I don't know the Father, or I don't know His will, or I don't know His instruction or His Torah, because I'm living it every day. I'm living
Yeah.
His peace. You know what I mean? And I,
Mhm.
I mean, I have problems and I have sin just like everybody, but out of most of that, like most habitual sin in my life has now been taken from me, and it's
Mhm.
been taken from me simply from asking Yeshua to take that burden from me, you
Mhm.
know. So it's crazy, man. Like what the Father will give you if you ask for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like any father with his child, wouldn't he give his child what his child's asking for?
Yeah.
And so it's
Of
like
course.
people are like, hey, like I'm wrapped up in these situations of my life that are engaging me, and it's like, okay, but are you praying? Are you fasting? Are you asking? Because that's the testimony I want to give you guys, is like, in all this, it's not me that's accomplished these things, but it's been what I believe is sacrificial praise to the Father, which is one of the things that King David, and I took note of, one of the things that he did, which was that the Father gave me this, that the Father has blessed me in this respect. That sacrificial praise is something that I think every older man should be teaching a younger man, just like
Yes.
it's just the same way that you use a hammer or you use this and that, or tools of faithfulness, right? It's
Yeah.
like sacrificial praise. And so, anyways, cutting back to the story. So my grandfather moves to Miami and he gets a job as a janitor. And while he's in this job as a janitor, because he wants to put all his kids through college, right? So he gets
Mhm.
this job and he's putting all his kids through Florida State. So he's put all his kids, and he's got 9 kids now,
Oh wow.
and so, and they're making it, man. I mean, they're just barely making it. They didn't grow up in riches, being a
Mhm.
janitor, but he knew they had to be educated. But at the same time, too, he, in his mind, at least in the beginning, they were going to go back and invade Cuba. His family was going to go back and invade Cuba. So he was pushing his kids out of a helicopter. Okay. So he's like, hey, kids, like, you guys are going to need to know how to rappel out of the helicopter. Like, this is something we got to learn right now. So my mother at 9 years old, he was just pushing her out of the helicopter to do like whatever, what do you call it? Parachuting, base jumping? I don't know what you call it.
Yeah.
Parachuting, I guess. So
Yeah.
she's like, she's going out and she's parachuting out of this helicopter. Well, that creates a kind of breed of a woman. All right.
Yeah.
You know, and it creates a kind of like a kind of situation, because then that woman might marry and then she might have kids, and then that kid might be like kind of nuts, you know? And so that's kind of what happened there. You know, people are like, why are you the way you are? Well, you know, I mean, there's a reason why. Like, I do have a couple screws loose, but no, but in that, you know, my mother, she just grew up being a battle axe. Like, she was just a battle axe of a woman. She wouldn't take no nonsense. And she was, you know, she was on my case. But and my father, you know, when they left Cuba, they left with some things. But my father, he was the richer of the parents. And when he left Cuba, they had nothing. I mean, they literally physically checked them, like the women and the children, and any gold that was like my grandmother had taken gold and like sewed it up into their garments, you know, and when they were leaving for the plane, because there was a point during the series of histories of Cuba where Fidel Castro was like, oh, no one's forced to stay here. If you want to go, you can go. And then a whole bunch of Cubans were like, yeah, we're going to go. And so that was my father. So my father, but even then when they were going, they're like checking them, making sure, you know, no gold was going with them. And that was the thing, man. They found gold that my dad had, that they had stitched in, and they ripped them right out of their garments, and then they put them on the plane, and they came over. And my father met my mother when my father was studying medicine in the Dominican Republic, and he met my mother in Miami through my uncle, and which is his brother, who passed away last year. And so he met my mother, and my mother was just, you know, like a femme fatale kind of woman, you know, highly educated, strong, and beautiful. I mean, she was beautiful. She, like, even though she was Protestant, I don't know, she like knew belly dancing and stuff. She was a beautiful woman. And so my father was like, yeah. And then they got married, and then they had me and my sister and then me, actually. And then but through my father's job, I moved from Michigan to Texas to Florida. You know, I mean, moved all over to inevitably Pennsylvania. And then in Pennsylvania, they moved into it. You know, at this point, they didn't have that much money. So they moved into a town, a coal mining town in the mountains. And they did this after we moved from Texas. So I moved into this town. I moved in with a Texan accent, you know. So I had to like situate myself, like, you know, um, you know, who I was, and explain who I was, and you know, as a kid, figuring out my bearings on, you know, how I'm going to relate to these new people. And so the Texan accent was highly mocked, you know. And so I had to learn my way around that culture. And this is young now. I'm only like 9 years old, and I remember, you know, now this town, you know, it was 2 miles long, and they always taught me in church, like, turn the other cheek, man. You know what I mean? Like, somebody punches you, you just turn the other cheek. You know, and these guys that were up on stage, and I was listening to them as a youngster, I had no idea that these men you should also question. You know, you don't take everything they say, you know, point blank. So I remember my first fight, man, this kid hits me, and I got up and I turned the other cheek, and this kid's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm turning the other cheek. I'm a Christian. This kid's like, oh, okay. And he just wailed on me. You know,
Oh no.
and then it got to a point, that was one fight, man. I was like, never again, never again. That was stupid. And, but it got me questioning, because I was like, what the heck? Like, I thought there was some kind of spiritual miracle supposed to happen. You know what I mean? Like, something was supposed to come down from the sky. I don't know. And I basically learned that I had to fight my way through my childhood, you know, because it was just a bunch of punk kids. But I found my friends, man, and we, you know, it was a good group of kids. At that point, though, to make it in the U.S., you know, we're talking 2004, 2005, both parents were working. And so my mom was working, my dad was working. And And so it was just me and my friends, man, and we were just running. I mean, wild. I mean, we were just running wild, brother. And they were good kids, but like we're basically at that point, we were all latchkey kids, and nobody
Hmm.
was really supervising us, and it was like Lord of the Flies, man. It was like
Yeah.
straight Lord of the Flies, and and it was survival. Like every day was survival for us, and but it was for me. I started operating in two worlds. There was a world where I was a Baptist Christian, and then there was a world where I was accepted by my peers, and I was running with my peers. And the world of running with my peers was more honest to me spiritually than it was being in the church
Mm-hmm.
because they accepted me. That's the one thing. Like, they talk about. I hear this kind of conversation happen. It's like I'd love to just get this in. It's like, it wasn't that they accepted me, because they had similar faults of mine or they didn't realize my sins were as big as their sins. There was always a status and there was always a standard of like what the right thing was,
Hmm.
even as a group of guys. Like there's times where we were doing something stupid and one of us was like, this ain't right. Like we shouldn't be doing this. And collectively as men, just because one guy, I mean, we were boys, but one guy saying this is a bad move, guys, we'd all go backwards and go, oh, hey, you're right, and we move away from it. Even as young men, we understood there was enough of a moral fabric. There was enough of the American culture of right and wrong, even though it
Hmm.
maybe might not have been a standard of morality like the Torah or anything like that. There's still enough of a fabric in society that we were like, we're not going to steal. We're not going to afflict older people.
Hmm.
We're going to be punk kids and be wild and be like punk rock skaters or whatever it was that we thought we were, which
Yeah.
don't even matter, man. That was just all like a product of consumerism and society. But
Hmm.
we knew like, hey, we're not going to do these things that are wrong. And there was more morale. Like it's so hard for me, and now I understand it as an adult. What it was is there was more applicative morality as the group of young men that we were. We were actually doing moral actions. We were doing more Torah based things because we were out in the world interacting with the world. We weren't sheltered in a church somewhere. You see what
Hmm.
I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's like I would never let my church friends talk smack on my worldly friends. And sometimes I bring my worldly friends to my church, right? But I would never let my church friends look down on them because I knew that when push came to shove, my boy was there and did the right thing. And you're just some sheltered guy in a church somewhere. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? You never had to deal with these kinds of moral issues that me and my friends were dealing with.
Yeah.
And I lost most of them, man. Like my graduating class, when it was all said and done, I think it was around 2006, 2007. I walked off the bus and I looked over where the stoners would hang out because it was right off the school property. All my
Yeah.
friends would hang out there, they congregate there, and that's the same place. Like if you got into a fight with somebody, you would wait till you get right out of school. That was the line everybody knew.
Hmm.
That's where you'd throw your punches right there. You'd take care of it there because that wasn't school grounds. If you're on school grounds, they take you to jail. If you're
Yeah.
over there, the teachers would kind of look the other way. So, but one day I get off the bus and I looked over and it was the stoners, man. I was like, that's where all the stoners are. And I just looked around, man. I saw like the girls, going, end of summer kind of deal, like the girls were over there, my friends were over here, and the stoners were over there, and I just was like taking it all in, and then that was that summer, and then I remember going back to school that fall, and I get off the bus and I look around, and when I get off the bus looking around, um, I look over and I notice that the stoners are like deathly skinny, man, like
Mm.
deathly skinny. And I noticed that like the popular girls were also over there and some of the jocks were over there. And I was like, what the heck's going on? Because I know like those were all like, let's smoke weed and listen to Leonard Skinner kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then and those groups had never mixed. And I didn't understand. And I learned it very quickly, man. I learned it. It was a new spirit that just came over the town, man. It was oh dude, it was bad. It was pills.
Yeah.
It was pills. It was oxycodone, And
Yeah.
the story got out, that the dealer that was dealing to the one guy, my friend showed up, it was a stoner, and he showed up the one day because I ended up talking to the stoners like, hey man, what are you guys into now? You guys don't seem all that great. Like I didn't tell them that, but I was like that was like my intention and my questions, like what's going on. And they told me like, hey man, we're into pills now, and they were into like
Mm.
all this rap music, and I was like, what's going on? And literally, it was like night and day, man. One summer goes by, and everything changed,
Yeah.
and I just noticed like there was no warmth anymore. Like it's just like the codeine and the oxycodone and all those like hardcore drugs just like sap the life force out of these kids, man.
Yep.
And then crime went up, and kids that never would steal started stealing. Cocaine started rolling in, and I didn't know it, but it was illegals were jumping the border and ending up in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. And then from Hazleton, Pennsylvania, these drugs were filtering down, and they were coming into these like coal mining towns, and people had nothing to live for really, and like
Yep.
and then it affected my group of friends. So my graduating class, the men, the women, they're doing okay, I guess, if you want to call it that. But the men, dude, they totally eviscerated me. One of my friends dead with his foot on the pedal, needle in his arm, like foot on the pedal on the brake,
Yeah.
and it was just crazy, man. Like I just in that one Black Sabbath song when I was growing up, I'd always like for some reason it just seared into my mind when it talks about Satan laughing spreads his wings. Like, dude, it's same thing, man. There was a minister in my town around the same time that said there's a death angel spread all over this county. And I was
Yeah.
like, I was Baptist. You don't talk about angels, that's not a thing. You don't talk about the spiritual world. And I just remember listening to that guy say that and just going, my God, he is so right.
Hmm.
Like I could just see that they're taking my whole town and my generation. Like they're just swallowing us up. They're swallowing
Yeah.
us up. And it started waking me up, to what's going on. And
Very
that
similar thing happened in my neck of the woods.
yeah, they hit us with that, man. They hit us
Yep.
with that. We were dealing with problems that our parents never had to deal with, or didn't know how to deal with, or didn't have the algebra to figure it out, because
Yep.
it was a new form, a new thing, a new spirit, a new wave, or whatever you want to call it. But it absolutely swallowed so many talented kids, man.
Yep.
And but it woke me up because I knew we were getting killed off, and I could just um that vacuum of death. The silence is so deafening, like
Yeah.
that kid you go hang out with and he's not there no more. That silence is just unreal.
Yeah.
And so I started getting wise to the ways of the world, and I started moving away from, alcohol and things of that nature. And I never was an addict. I never was a big drinker. I never was a big pot smoker or anything like that. Like, I actually developed or it might have been a spiritual inclination to avoid addiction, to
Mm.
avoid chemical dependencies. And that's one of those things, man. That's just like grace from the Father that I have that.
Yeah.
Um, because I should have, by every metric, been dead or worse,
Mm.
and I'm not. I'm here, and so then that is just a praise, it's just like Salah, like that I'm here, and so
It's heavy.
oh, dude, I grieve
Yeah.
every day, man. I grieve every day.
What they did with specifically opioids in this country, especially in from basically where I live in Western New York, straight down the Appalachian Trail, basically.
Yep.
That whole part of the country is just destroyed from opioids, and it's nobody wants to talk about it. I feel like the government just looks the other way, probably because they're making money on it, and everybody knows somebody who's, I mean, I know multiple people, but I just everybody has somebody in their family, in their immediate circle who died from opioids.
Oh yeah.
So
Yep.
it's not just a it's not just like a thing that people do sometimes at parties like cocaine or,
No, man. It like it becomes a part of their living, and in that,
Yeah.
like, it's one of those things, like you said, like if people won't talk about it, it almost goes away because
Mm.
it tears them up, it tears people up, you know. I mean, even like, even though I've never done um like willingly done opioids, my buddy would, he would dip cigarettes in freaking morphine, like
Oh man.
anhydrous morphine, man, and he'd pass me a cigarette and I'd be smoking nicotine and anhydrous morphine. And I
Mm.
didn't even want to, I didn't even know about it. Like, you know, and until I was feeling weird. And I was like, what's going on? You know, well, oh man, you got my special cigarettes. Like, dude, I don't want your freaking special cigarettes.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? I remember this one
Uh,
time, we were getting pulled over. My one rule, because we're so poor, man. Like when I got a
mm.
car, you know, we always, that's the thing. We had nothing, but we shared, man. Like we shared.
Mm.
There was no want in with my wolf pack. It wasn't even my wolf pack. It was just the wolf pack I was part of. There was no want. If somebody was hungry, somebody else would feed them. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That there was more New Testament church in a group of punk kids than I see in many of these churches in this day and age, and many of these groups and communities that I've visited, you know, and it's
Yeah.
just like, I want that back. You know what I mean? I desire that back. And
Yeah.
it looks like the Father's giving it back to me, which is another whole subject in that. Yeah, it's just, you know, when I was like 18, 19, man, I said, you know, I was actually around 15 where I started catching on. I realized I'm like ignorant. Now, my mother never told me much about what was going on with my family in Cuba because I don't know why. She just never
Mm.
did. And so imagine her surprise when I realized that what a problem communism was. And I was like, Mom, Dad, like, you guys realize like we're missing relatives because of like communists killed them? Like we're
Yeah.
allowing this? Like we need to go support that effort. We need to fight communism. And my mom was just like, okay, dear, you know, and she was just like cooking something.
Yeah.
She never told me anything about that we actually had a family organization set up to do exactly that. And
Hmm.
it's still, I guess, somebody else is running it now, but somebody else is running it for a while. But
Oh,
the
is
thing
that still
is,
going on, you mean?
yeah, yeah. My
Oh
grandpa
wow.
set up some kind of organization, and then he stepped out of it. Somebody and had
Uh-huh.
somebody else run it, and now I think it's still out there running. It's like a
Oh wow.
Spanish organization against communists, you know, and and so it's crazy, you know. Like around 15, 16, I was telling my parents, like, hey, like we need to fight these guys. Like there's no stopping to it. There's no
Yeah.
nothing to it, and and my mom was just like, okay, yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm like, Mom, come on, like you're educated, like you don't understand like the dangers of communism. Aren't you seeing that in our own country? Like, isn't this kind of going on right now? Yeah,
Mm.
it'll be fine, you know. Like she just kind of poo-pooed it, and I had no idea, but I basically, because I was kind of estranged from my grandfather, my mother was kind of estranged from her father,
Hmm.
and I'd see them periodically, but I wouldn't see him, you know, like a grandkid would see his grandfather, you know. And so I didn't know it, but the family told me afterwards. I reconnected with my family that I'm basically the closest thing in the family to my grandfather.
Mm.
Like it's unreal. Like and my grandfather, I got to meet with him. He gave me a bunch of books that he wrote on
Oh wow.
prophecies, Daniel prophecy, things of that nature. It's all blood, brother. It's all blood, man. We're coming to a point where it's like we have to fulfill the roles that have been designated to us. There's righteousness in us. There's a
Mm.
spiritual legacy that we inherit, but there's also a physical legacy because your parents have decided to procreate on this earth, and your parents before them, and their parents before them, and their parents before them. And so we have a legacy going back. And it's not a salvation thing, you know what I mean? It's not like however somebody's whatever, but right now we're here. This is a special moment. Even this conversation is special, brought to you by the Father. All
Hmm.
these things are being brought together, and they're either going to be pulled together or we're going to allow it to fall apart, but we all
Yeah.
have a chance to work together. Hey baby, I'm on the phone. All right, show me later, baby. So so what I'm saying is we have to stop looking at these things as coincidences. Like this
Hmm.
brother being brought before me, or this friend that we just became friends with. This is not a coincidental thing. This is possibly the will of the Father, or possibly something from the adversary. And
Hmm.
it's for our spiritual fasting and prayer to come to a point where we understand, like, hey, we're supposed to be working together in a spiritual family in a spiritual fashion. Like that's what we're called to do. That is our legacy.
Absolutely.
That's our legacy. And and some of us hear it, Some of us hear it and ignore it. Some of us have come to certain conclusions. Some of us are going to come to more conclusions the more that the body is able to prophesy.
Mm.
And so it's just here, there, and everywhere. I'm not used to just like talking like this, but so I'm sorry if I'm like
No,
all
it's
over, but
that's totally not really. You're not really all over the place. Actually,
good,
I'm it's been pretty one fluid line
good,
so
good.
far.
But in all that, you know, I didn't know it, but I had this relationship with my mother, and I'm learning to love her and all these things. But she had an issue with her father. Here she has a son that is her father, So it's like, how do you make that up? Well,
Yeah.
it's crazy because I'm sitting there and and I find out that my grandfather's mother was like my mother, and so he was seeing his mother and my mother. My mother was seeing me in her father. These are the generational curses that we need to break. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? These are the kinds of things, and when we realize this is a repeating pattern, that we have the power and the permission, the authority in Yahshua to abolish and to break all these things, man. And that's the applicative sense of the Torah that I'm trying to erect in all this. Is like what we physically do, the virtues that we espouse and the decisions that we make in our everyday lives, if they do not lead to virtue, they are meaningless. They mean
Mm.
nothing. Like
Hmm.
people talk about life and death on the tip of the tongue, right? But
Yeah.
it's really also your actions and your inaction that defines everything, you know. And so 15 years old, I was going through this phase. I didn't know it was a spiritual calling. 20, 21 years old, I lost one of my friends. And it was interesting. It was during that Bitcoin era.
Mm.
Uh, my parents, they'd taken a mission trip to Japan, and they were like, "Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Nope, I'm good." I saw my opportunity. Now I lived in this row home in this coal mining town, so there's they build these homes all together. It's like one big floor, and like the
Hmm.
walls are paper thin. So if you sneeze, three other people would say like, "God bless you," like in this house. You know what I mean? Like the walls is like paper thin. And I saw this opportunity, man, and I set up these Bitcoin machines, dude. I was mining Litecoin. I was mining
Uh-huh.
Bitcoin. So I was mining Litecoin, and I kept tripping breakers. I was like, shoot. So I was putting them on different floors. So there's like four or five floors in the house. So I was like putting one on different floors, like watching the breaker trip. Okay, put another one like that. And so my first power bill came in. It was like 9 grand,
Oh
straight up
man.
9 grand. Yeah, but I was making 12,000. So I was
Uh-huh.
like, this is no brainer. So I would wake up every morning, and it was like I couldn't lose. I'd wake up
Yeah.
and it was like, oh my God, I made like $1,600 overnight, you
Hmm.
know. And I was looking at Maseratis. I was scrolling through. Like I was also really heavy into like political libertarian stuff. So
Yeah.
I was like, man, I'm gonna fund all these movements that are gonna change the world. Like I just thought I could not lose, man. And then the bubble popped, and I was
Yeah.
like, so when it was coming down, I had all these things hit me, man. Like my buddy passed away in a wreck. They were going to the beach. I almost went. I said no at the last minute. But see, it's crazy how this happens because that group of friends, they were going there for licentious reasons, right? They were
Mm.
going there for these sexual reasons, find girls, whatever, drinking, whatever. And
Yeah.
I was moving away from that. I was like, I don't want none of these girls, man. I don't want none of this, whatever. Like I don't want none of this.
Hmm.
And it's like I could have been swallowed by it, but I just didn't want it. No, I knew it was the world, and it wasn't satisfying or fulfilling for me. And so I was like this like huge tease, man, with girls, because I'd like be kind of interested in them, and I see that one thing that was worldly about them, it turned me off, and I'd be like, ah. And so I just like let them go, like I'm good. And so this collapse happens, and I'm having this spiritual episode because it's like my friend died. I'm like at an all-time low. And when I was making money, the most money I was making, besides when I did my eBay gig, and I did my eBay gig, and I was like making good money then too. But I didn't know what money was because I was a teenager. So,
Hmm.
but I was making like close to 7,000 on eBay before eBay went
Oh
stupid
wow.
with their fees. Yeah, it was nuts. I was taking PlayStations, and I was pulling out the hard drive and putting a terabyte hard drive in, and then reselling it for like $150 on top of
Oh
whatever
wow.
it's worth. Yeah. So I was just rolling, dude. I was a money making machine. I was like, yes. And and like I got grounded because my parents are kind of overbearing. I got grounded for a summer. So I did this like my buddies called it the Tom Sawyer because I had just gotten a burner for my computer and they
Oh
grounded me,
yeah.
but they left me a computer. Like what? And so I got this burner for my computer, and then I told my friends, like, here's a DVD that's burned. You bring me 5 DVDs and I'll burn 5 movies or 5 games for you, whatever it was. So I had my boys coming up to the window in the front of the house, passing me DVDs through the window. I was taking for every DVD I gave them, I took 5 DVDs back. So I was like, at the end of my grounding period, my parents are standing in my door looking down, and they're like, how'd you get all these DVDs? Because my floor was covered in them, man. I had stacks of them, and I had one friend that was like huge into horror movies. Interesting
Uh-huh.
thing about the horror movies though, and he liked this he was after these Japanese titles. I don't even know, they're bizarre, grotesque,
Hmm.
and but I was downloading and burning them for him because he was making a sweet deal with me. And so, but eventually that kid, he watched so many horror movies, he became schizophrenic.
Yeah.
Like just so, from watching all this gore and blood and all this stuff. And I couldn't even
Not
stomach
good.
it, man. No,
Yeah.
I was more obsessed with burning stuff. Like I was just like, the turnaround is what I loved. Like
Yeah.
I got the movie done. Give me like production. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And dude, I'm telling you, I had stacks, and my floor was covered them. I had them. I was putting them on the walls. I was nailing nails in the wall, and putting DVDs like for decorations.
Yeah. Oh wow.
It was nuts. And but it was also that era where I was like really pursuing information,
Hmm.
and reading and reading and reading. I was reading all the Harvard classic books because I was grounded. I was running out of things to do, man. I was
Right.
stuck in my room the whole summer. I was reading Harvard classic books with like the old English and like just trying to educate myself. And I got to a point, um, and then the whole Bitcoin thing happened, and I'm in college, and all that was going on, and I went into a depression, and in my depression, one day because I had already worked my way out of being Trinitarian, and so I
Hmm.
was like, I dropped to my knees and I just said, Father, you know, if you're out there, you got to show me because, I sidestepped. When I was like 15 years old, I started reading a book by Dr. Kathy Burns.
Hmm.
15, 16, 17 is old blur for me, really. But she wrote this book called Freemasonry and the Occult, Dr. Kathy
Hmm.
Burns, and
Hmm.
she did a fantastic job. But she also did a fantastic job in screwing up my whole like Christian perspective, which is a good thing
Yeah.
because I would walk into my church and
Yeah.
I'd go, "Why is there IHS on a cross?
Yeah.
Why is there this? Why is there that? What does this mean?" And it just went and it started my whole perspective of all these things, man, just started like,
Yeah.
whoa, what's going on here? Satanism is in the church.
Hmm.
And I was so confused because it's like, how can Satanism be in the church, but the Bible be true? Because to me, it was the same thing. Church and Bible are the same thing. And it started helping me divorce and just rip up those boundaries and
Hmm.
understand those boundaries, that the Bible is one thing, church is something else.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah. The church
and
church is full of people who are sinners,
right,
and the Bible is the word of God. So,
right,
and personally, I think that Satan is the busiest in the church. Like the places where people are, this far or this far from the truth, that's where he's going to be doing his best work. He doesn't care about atheists and communists and people who are never
right.
gonna.
He owns them.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
already got him. He's doing his best work where people are this far from the truth. People
Right.
in churches, people even in the Torah community.
Well, and that's the one thing, let's take a side note. With Appalachian's Family of the Way, when they asked me to speak there, one of the first things I did, I told them, I said, film it. I said, film it because if anything comes about from it, I was like, I want you guys to remember, I'm only keeping my word. And the first thing I did when I delivered that first message I gave to that congregation, the first thing I made it about was about child predators, man. That was the
Mm,
first thing right off the bat. And I do not do that. I do not care what people think about me.
mm,
I know it was awkward for everybody there. I know it was, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it again in any
yeah.
community I'm in. And I just told, I said, here are the rules, because this is something, as I've traveled from this community, that community, this Torah community, that Torah community, and I've experienced these things. One thing I realized is there was a lot of predators out there, man.
Yeah.
And my wife, she grew up in the Torah community, and she knows stories, and she was feeding me the stories. And then I had my own experiences with some of these things.
Mm.
And it's like, bro, you have a combination of brothers and sisters that are in many ways like me and you, where they're like, oh, I want to hide my family away into the, like, hide them in West Virginia and
Yeah.
like teach them about God and everything's going to work out. And they may over shelter their children, which
Mm.
is just as bad,
Yeah.
and then something happens to that child. This child's living a perfect world, right, in perfect spiritual balance, and then something bad happens and it devastates the whole family, man.
Yeah.
I've seen it. So the first thing I freaking did, man, when I got up there to talk, is I said, listen here, if I find out anyone here has any kind of record, and you guys didn't come and talk to me about it, and I'm gonna look up. I said, all those names you signed in that guest book, I was like, we're gonna look them up. I
Mm.
said, and if any of you guys are on Megan's Law or something of that nature and you didn't tell me, it's going to be a problem.
Mm.
And I said, I'm going to handle it my way. Okay. My way. That's how I'm going to handle it. And that's going to be a problem for you. And I went on, I said, I will find you straight up. I said, if these aren't your kids, I said, you don't go anywhere near them. I don't
Mm.
care. If you're a man and those are your children, you have no business. Now, if the kid's getting into trouble, right? The
Yeah.
kid's getting into a problem, kid might die, drowning, please save the child. Okay.
Mm.
But otherwise, you don't correct other people's children.
Yeah.
Okay. You talk to the parent. You have to have, if you have guts enough to correct that kid, then you should have guts enough to go tell that parent what that kid's up to and let the
Yeah.
parent correct it and reroute the energy back through the parent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that I've discovered through all these studying and trying to figure out how to protect the assemblies and the churches and the communities, is that, brother, we got to be sheepdogs, man. Straight up
Mm.
sheepdogs. They have completely emasculated males.
Yeah.
Completely emasculated males. Being a strong male has nothing to do with physique, how much
Mm.
you can lift, how many punches you can throw. It's none of that. It's directional and focused energy. And
Mm.
it's properly focused spiritual energy. Okay.
Mm.
You have to assess the children, you have to assess the women, you have to assess the weaker of the group, and you have to make sure that you keep eyes on what's happening and to create a covering for them. The single women of the group, they need a covering just like anyone else. But there's boundaries and directions on how we should be going about all that stuff, so we don't fall into temptation, we don't fall into situations that are bad for us. But the best thing you can do is watch after these children, brother, and there's nothing wrong with being a little too overprotective or questioning somebody. Where are you going with that kid? Oh, I'm just going up right over here. I don't think that's a good idea. You're taking them out of eyesight of their parents.
Yeah.
And that should be all you should say to them. And that should inspire change in their behavior.
Yeah.
If it's suspicious behavior, if they're a normal person, not a predator. If somebody said that to me and I was with somebody else's kid, like trying to help them, I go, hey, no, not the case. Like, I don't know who his parents are. Kid was wandering off. Like,
Mm-hmm.
But if it's to go somewhere secluded, what do you have business going somewhere seclusion? And we have to understand that this is a real freaking problem, man. This is a big deal, because folks are having assemblies in their homes, and then they're allowing, maybe you have a weak man or weak leader in that home,
Mm-hmm.
and here comes in one of these guys that have nefarious, things. They have nefarious things to do, or they're looking to do some kind of nefarious thing. And they're the predators. I mean, dude, you ever seen that one interview where that guy, they're like, how do you know which kid that you were gonna go after? And he go, well, I would see if they had a strong dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like the predators being interviewed, they themselves said, like, there was the strong masculine presence that determined whether that kid was a victim or not.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing that I did when I went to talk to that community.
Wow.
And I wish I did that other communities ago. And
Mm-hmm.
and they allowed me, and I told them, I was like, this is how I operate, and this is how we should operate. And I'm I'm not enforcing anything on anybody, but I'm just putting this out there, And so, I to this day, man, I know that those kids are going to be protected because that was voiced, that was declared over that
Mm.
body, that was spiritually declared over that body. And it could have been anyone that did it. I'm just the one that stood up there and started it.
Hmm.
But I know that the men in that community are now it's part of their minds, it's seeded into their heart, into their soul.
Yeah.
It's part of the spiritual bond of the community. That community, those children are going to grow up protected in Sukkot
Mm.
and what have you. And if there's anything that may happen, it's going to be dealt with, period. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so it's such a critical function that we need to be employing in our assemblies and deploying, have a
Mm.
plan, and it's okay. Like some brothers, I've had brothers come up to me and they say, hey, one time when I was 16 years old, a girl, she charged me. Now I'm on the sex offenders list. I've had brothers come to me, have these conversations. That kind of thing does happen,
Yeah.
especially when we're growing up. The way we grew up, man, this is wild, absolutely nuts how we grew
Yeah.
up with these things that we were into, man. I understand if a brother comes to me and says, look, dude, like this happened, or look, this happened in my life, but I didn't get caught, or hey, man, this is a sin of mine, and I'm struggling with it. I've had all of that happen to
Hmm.
me. But when you come and you talk to me, that's one thing. But if I come and stumble on a situation that's not okay,
Hmm.
that's a separate matter, right?
Yeah.
So it's like King David talks about sin, transgression, and iniquity, right? There's three tiers of sin. One is knowingly sin, one is not knowingly sin, one is general, right? Trespass being the greatest of the sins, right? So iniquity is
Mm.
lawlessness, but it's like it's not as bad as trespass. Trespass is knowing that you're doing it, right?
Mm.
Like knowing that the boundary's here and you've crossed it, right? Iniquity is kind of like having the foreknowledge that maybe this is something the Father doesn't want, or maybe
Mm.
it might infringe, but you're not, the borders are unsure. And then there's sin, which is just general, and so it's like
Never heard
those
that
two.
before, actually. That's super interesting.
Yeah, nobody talks about that, but you look it up, it's all there. I promise. It's kosher. It's kosher. So moving forward in my life, I guess, I had all these experiences, man. It's been incredible. But fast
Yeah.
forward, I'm not a Trinitarian, and I was on my knees and I was praying to the Father. And I was like, Father, you got to show me what's going on here, because I
Mm.
was too stupid to freaking know. Like I couldn't dissolve church and Bible, because it was
Mm.
for Baptists. It's like one and the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I dropped to my knees, I prayed, and dude, like the next day, I met my wife. Like the next
Oh,
day,
wow.
man, and she's a Torah observant, and she takes me to this and that. And well, actually, I met her at a gun show. I met her online on Facebook. It was crazy. A year prior, when I was depressed and in a depression, I said, the only thing I can do right now is to be productive. And the only way I can be productive is if I just send all these little, like anytime I saw somebody who was a constitutionalist or a Christian or something, I would just send them a message of support, like, hey, you do you do good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just because I was like depressed, dude. And I was doing this like in bed, like just like I didn't want to get up, man. I was just like a
Hmm.
worm. Like just like I was like in the pits, dude. And I was just like, I gotta do something positive. So I was like trying to like just message people on Facebook, like, hey, you do you. And she had posted some kind of constitutional thing,
Hmm.
and I had messaged her, and she didn't see it. And so a year later, I'm down on my knees and I'm praying to the Father, and I had just, oh yeah, I forgot this other thing. My mother and my father just started up home churches. So,
Hmm.
they're Baptists, they keep Sabbath, they keep kosher, and they set up a home church in this row home, bro. Talk about faith,
Hmm.
like, and so I was home from school and I was still working and stuff. And so I was like, you know what? I support this. Like, this is good. This is organic. This is like, and another couple families moved in, and three families were feeding all these kids, man. And these kids, they end up being the kids of my friends who fell by the wayside.
Hmm.
So here a kid would pop into my
Oh,
house
wow.
and I'm handing him a bowl of food that my mother made. And I'm handing him a bowl of food and I see my friend, and it's like, who's your dad? And they're like, oh, my dad is this guy, Jed. Yeah, I know Jed. and I did really well. And it's like, here you go, buddy, and then
Yeah.
we had a
Wow.
big bay window in the living room, so we just kept all the kids there, and some of their parents would come too, and because it's a poor area, brother. So like
Hmm.
people come in, free food, yeah, and and so we were feeding all these kids, and I took it as a measure of faith. And so me and my parents were all working great. I mean, it was great for the relationship. It was, because my parents and I never really saw eye to eye, but here we were like,
Hmm.
yes, we were unified, and we're going to feed these kids, and we're feeding them, we're teaching them Bible stories, and then my wife messaged me, after I did that prayer, because I was running Bible study, and and at the same time too, these pastors started visiting us, and they were telling us that we were going against the church because we were unchurched, and that wasn't good.
Oh,
So it was like completely retarded in my book, because like
yeah.
here we're feeding kids, you guys are telling us that we're not okay. All right, sure, buddy. And I literally, dude, I threw them guys out of the house. I gave that guy so many words to think about from here to the front door, man. I sent that guy packing. I mean, here he thought I was like, because I'm like, I try to wear like good clothes and stuff, and like,
Mm.
be civil and all that. And but the community knew who we were, and the cops and everybody, they knew, because I grew up there, and so everybody
Yeah.
was like on board with it. It was wild. And then my wife,
That's
she
crazy
messages me, and yeah, it was great. It
that
was a
they would
great
do
part of
that.
my life. I know. Oh, the
Well,
bastards,
that
yeah,
part's
they
too.
were
That part's
jealous.
crazy too.
They were jealous. They were
Yeah.
jealous of us. They were jealous of a good work, and we were
Yeah.
zealous for good works. And that's where I want to get back to as soon as I can. Is back with the people. It's zealous for good works, man.
Yeah.
And that's purpose right there. That's purpose. And so my wife messages me, and she's like, "Where do you go to church?" And I'm like, "Funny thing, because I've just gotten kicked out of most of the churches because I just sent their pastors packing." And I ask questions like, I'd visit churches, and I'd hang out with my Christian friends too, and I was kind of known for asking questions. I was a deist. I didn't believe that the
Hmm.
Father was directly involved or affected anything in the world. That's kind of what the conclusion I got to. And a lot of pastors like talking to me, and about it, and I give them, I try to give them from, and they give me books of theology, and I read theology, dude. I read so
Hmm.
much. I read John Calvin. I read all that stuff. I don't like Calvinism at all. I
Hmm.
took a strict stance against that. I realized it's just a total, it's cancer. It's an ideological cancer. Should not
Yeah.
exist. I've seen it. I see it coming into the Torah movements.
Yeah.
It's like, go away, guys. Seriously. Like I would never send somebody packing, but I would give them a run for their money over that nonsense. That guy burnt his opposition at the stake. Like,
Yeah.
like come on. What kind
Yeah.
of fruit does that guy have? Like, it's like if you and I disagree and you burn me at the stake. Like, and then instead of people are still like, yeah, listen to this guy. Like,
A lot of those old theologians did that. And
it's crazy.
if they were at all on the right side of the debate or had any amount of power, and we kind of like revere some of these guys and look up to them as theological powerhouses, and absolutely they were burning people at the stake, and they were doing the most terrible things that you can imagine.
Dude, I know it, man. I know it. And then one of my close friends, he's actually here. He's been helping me set things up on the farm and helping me out
Hmm.
like crazy these last couple of days. And he's a great kid. So it's funny, man. You put the kingdom first. It's like I was actually gonna do a video this morning talking about this, but I'll talk about it right here. It's like the whole question of, do you keep the feasts?
Hmm.
And it's like, brother, so many things have been added to me because of the feast. Keeping
Hmm.
Sukkot with my best friend, now he's gone, but I have those memories, and then even my friends that were part of my ministry groups online, they came to visit me at Sukkot. Then they decided that they're actually going to be even better friends with me. Now they're great friends with me. So
Hmm.
my house is only expanded from keeping the feasts. Now
Yeah.
here's the crazy part. I didn't keep them on my calendar. My buddy John, it took him 2 years for me to go down there to hang out with his uncle, which I've been keeping the feast with his uncle for 7 years. See, what happened with my buddy John is, um, you know, he thought I was in a cult, and he had visited my house twice, and he was like, "This guy's totally off his rocker." He had no idea, and I was super zealous at this point, so I was like, "You see," like, and I was like super direct, And he's like, this guy's off his rocker, and that's okay. Like it's okay. People come, I understand, but I'm gonna be me, and and that's just how it's gonna have to be. I'm not gonna be any other way. And so he came out of that. I thought he was coming to Torah. I didn't have any
Hmm.
idea that he thought I was absolutely off my rocker. So he's in a tool truck and he's sitting with a plainsman. Now, plainsmen aren't Amish. They're not Mennonite. They're plains people. They have like a
Hmm.
wide brimmed hat. And so this guy, his name was Stanley, I think. And Stanley was the plains people. They have a nice big German Bible, like Old English, like KJV, and it's got a wooden like a clasp on it and a wooden exterior. That's how
Oh,
they
wow.
operate. They keep this big Bible with them. They work really hard and all that, and they're good people. They're genuinely pretty
Hmm.
good people, but they're very religious and they look down on everybody. And so my
Hmm.
buddy Johnny's like driving, and he's talking to this guy, and he's like, "Yeah, my buddy Sebi, he's into this law stuff, and he's driving, and Stanley goes, "Oh, I know the answer. I can give you the answers for that guy." And he opens his Bible and he starts reading to him passages about the law.
Hmm.
So Johnny's no dummy. John's a real smart guy. And so he's driving. He goes, "Wait a minute. Did you just read that the law is going to judge us when it's all said and done? Is that what you just read?" And the guy goes, slams his Bible shut, puts it next to him, doesn't say a word to John for the rest of the
Oh,
trip. And that
man.
was John. Because John was like, "Wait a minute, did you hear what you just said?" And I
Yeah.
don't know what passage the guy was reading. I have no idea. And so that same weekend, John came to my house and he goes, "All right, Sebi." He's like, "Listen," he's like, "you're coming off as awfully religious." He's like, "I'm not big on religious. I died to religion a long time ago." He's like,
Hmm.
he's like, "I'm not into that kind of stuff. I'm for real, And I'm like, "Don't worry, bro. I'm for real." So we started hitting the books, man. And for years we were studying together. One day, it's like 4 years in of hanging out and studying Torah every weekend and visiting all these other different assemblies and stuff.
Hmm.
He says, he's like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "My Uncle Eric." He's like, "My Uncle Eric, he's Torah observant." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yes, oh my God. I used to frame houses with him and my dad, and he would teach me Torah, but then my dad would tell me not to listen to him because he was in a cult, but he's not in a cult. He's one of you guys." And I'm like, "But you're one of me too." He's like, "Us." He's like, "Yeah, he's like us." I was like, "No kidding." He's like, "Yeah, let's go to the Sukkot." And I was like, ah. I was big on the calendar. I was like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
figured the calendar out. What calendar is he on?" And he's like, "Well, does it even really matter?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, calendar matters. Calendar matters." And this is where I'm at in that stage. Yeah, absolutely. Like, conjunction, right?
Yeah.
And then that whole spiel of what I thought was a calendar. And it took him 2 years. Finally, John like begged me, dude. He like got on his knees and begged me. I was like, "Bro, please don't." Because at this point, man, I have like work relationship with this guy. We work together every day, and
Hmm.
like we study Torah together. I'm like, "Bro, please don't, please get off your knees." He's like, "You got to come down." I was like, "All right, fine." I go down to North Carolina with visit his Uncle Eric because he went down. John went down the one year. John kept two Sukkots that year. That's how religious me and my boy were. He kept two Sukkots, and so he kept mine because I wouldn't go down, and then he kept my uncle's, who was on in my opinion, the wrong calendar, and still is on the wrong calendar. But you know what? He's got the right spirit. And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that's helped me determine one of the most critical things in my Torah walk is that love is the highest law.
Yes.
Love is the highest law. And so Eric has been keeping Sukkot for almost 18 some years in North Carolina with
Oh, wow.
that same community. So Eric has seeded generations
Hmm.
of families that have met their significant other, keeping Sukkot together, keeping the
Hmm.
feast together, and their children
It's a
for
wonderful
15
thing.
years. 15 years, man. So
It's a big
then,
impact.
huge. So then here I come down with my boy John, and me and John, I mean, I still drink, and smoke cigarettes or whatever at this point, and I don't now, but I mean, I'll still drink some, and and smoke cigarettes. And no, I'm kidding. I'm not a habitual smoker. I did smoke over Sukkot because I do enjoy a good pack of American spirits. You know, I'm a 3-time quitter, so it's like, I mean, I tell you what, man, you're mixing concrete. You just want a cigarette, like you just. You know, if you could judge me on that, I don't care. I'm not a habitual smoker, and I'm respecting my temple. But me and Johnny went down, and we're drinking, smoking, and we had another one of our friends come down, and he was drinking, smoking. We got into a big old fight, you know, a big old argument, this and that. And it was funny, man, because the years leading up to him trying to get me to go meet his Uncle Eric, he goes, so he's like, Sebi, you know, he calls me Sebi. He's like, Sebi, he's like, you'll love it, man. It's like a bunch of ex-bikers and a bunch of like ex-military guys. They drink and they smoke and they get into fights. It's great. You love it. And I was like, dude, I've got a family. I don't want to go down into that drinking, fighting. What the hell? What do you think I want about that? Like, what do you think I like about it? Like, that's not even enticing. And he was like, oh, you'll love it, man. It's like right up your alley. I'm like, what about that's up my alley? So it took me 2 years. I go down there. These are the most peaceful. What he meant to say is these guys are just down to earth. These guys are, you know, some of them, like the one guy worked waxing floors, but he's one of the wisest men I know. The other guy, he was a framer, you know, and he's just the hardest worker I know. And then another guy was a veteran, you know, and all the drinking and smoking and fighting was actually John and me when I got down there, and they were actually the most peaceful bunch, and you know, and so but through that we started bringing our own friends down from Pennsylvania. And so we were just this rowdy bunch. And these poor North Carolina people, they never even knew what happened. Like, here's a bunch of Yankees. And, you know, it's just what they call it. They're like a bunch of Yankees, you know? And so you're like in there, and we were just like just spitfires, man, just getting into all kinds of fights about the Bible, this and that. And then it was beautiful, man. It was a beautiful thing. And then we mellowed out, and then we realized it's not about all these religious discussions. It's about the family, because that's what the guys at Sukkot taught us. It was about. It's about the family. Taking care of the family, making sure the kids are having fun, and then we realized like it was a shift in us. Like, yeah, of course, that's what this is all about, and it helped mold us and meld us to what was important in life. And so, you know, we came out of that Sukkot series of Sukkots, a couple of Sukkots later, and we said, hey, man, you know, I'm gonna do campfires at my house. Johnny was like all about it. Yeah, brother, let's do it. And so Friday night, my company, we lift houses and we moved houses for a living. So every person that worked in that company had a measure of faith in God, because we all had so many close calls. So we all had a measure of faith in God. And so the Christians, man, I'd invite them. They'd come over to our campfire, and we'd be at the campfire, and you didn't have to pressure nobody to talk about the Bible or talk about Torah. They brought it up. They want to talk about it. You get enough men around a fire, a campfire, they're going to want to talk about it. They're going to want to talk about God. Yeah. And so here, these Christians, man, even my atheist friend, I'll never forget my one atheist friend. He comes over and he goes, no, you're not understanding Sebi at all. He says this to my other friend that's just there, a newcomer. He's like, you don't understand Sebi's argument about the Bible at all. Here's his argument. He goes on to list out my biblical argument to this other friend of mine who's a Christian, arguing and articulating better than the Christian was about what my position was, because he heard it so many times around the fire. He understood. And so it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, through osmosis, the brotherhood that was there promotes knowledge share, man. It promotes knowledge share. And so we were keeping Sabbath. We'd start the fire before sundown, and our friends were coming and keeping Sabbath right there with us. Right there with us. And they would they'd be like, oh, we got to get out of here because you guys have Sabbath tomorrow. And we'd be like, we're keeping it right now, guys. Like, you've been keeping it with us. This is the Sabbath, the great burden that you guys are talking about when you're working alongside of us. This is it right here. Yeah. And they loved it, man. They loved it. And we were popping. And then 2020 happened. And 2020 happened. And you know, people were like, oh, Seb, you're going to do the fires. And initially they said, you know, if you don't wear your mask, you're going to kill grandma. And I didn't want to kill grandma. So I was like, but then, and they were saying it was coming from China, and I don't trust China, you know, and I don't trust our own government, but I don't trust China neither. And I was like, and then I realized what it was. I said, oh, it's communism. So I said, no, 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 no. I said, not only are we going to keep fires, we're going to make them 10 times bigger. And so that's what we did. We made massive bonfires, man. 2020, the law in Pennsylvania, what went out, you know, in the news was you couldn't have more than 10 people at a gathering outside, right?
Hmm.
Or you had to be 6 feet apart, whatever. We had these roaring bonfires, man. And all my friends, bro, we stood tall. We'd park their tool trucks. Because all my friends at this point, because of the arguments of Torah and because of Johnny's influence, because Johnny was one of the first that broke off, started his own company. You know, all my buddies with their own company trucks, they started parking their trucks in my front lawn and in a row, like, come and get us. Come and get us. And the police station was right at the top of the hill. So the police would come driving right by and we'd be there looking at them and they drive right by and because nobody mess with us. And you know, it's funny, the one guy, you know, he was a newcomer at my fire and he's like, bro, don't you ever get in trouble? And I was like, nope, because we were the backbone. We were your plumbers. We were your electricians, your general contractors. We
Hmm.
were the community there, and
Yeah.
that's all it took was a few good men, and they knew who we were. We were a few good men, and we were gonna sit around this fire, and we weren't gonna get out of control, and it wasn't gonna be drunkenness. It was just gonna be
Yeah.
a couple men working through life's many persistent questions. And that was my Sabbath. And that was the greatest stretch of ministry that I've had in my local community, was just getting the men around the fire. Because when
Yeah.
the men get around the fire, guess who comes along? Their girlfriends, their wives, their children. And then my wife, the whole time that I was bringing all these men in, you know what she starts doing without me ever asking? She starts feeding them.
Hmm.
Well, did you know that in a covenant, one of the first levels of friendship in a friendship covenant is to break bread with each other?
Hmm.
That's one of the first stages of covenant, right? So we're breaking bread with each other. Next thing you know, we'd end the fires of prayer.
Hmm.
It was all organic. I wasn't like some kind of scheme, like I got you
Hmm.
now, like let's all, you know. But I'd pray over them, like, "What's your problem, man? I'm real down because of this. Come here, pray over my brother, man."
Hmm.
And then let him go, you know, and go out in the world. And that went on, and it went on for a long time until you know, my buddy Johnny passed, and that's the same way, man. We were around the fire. There's like
Hmm.
maybe 12 of us, 13 of us, and he's like, "Man, I just did a bunch of work for these people that were recently vaxxed." And we're like, "Oh, really? Like, haha, like you might get the vaccine, like you might get the little worm or whatever it is they're giving
Hmm.
you." And we were all joking around about it. And then he was like, he just went downhill, man. He just kept having pains and stuff. And he kept showing up for
Oh,
the
wow.
fires. And he ended up getting, he wasn't vaccinated, but they shed on him because
Yeah.
he had specifically talked about this instance where he was working in a close room like this, you know,
Hmm.
finishing it out or something like that. And they were recently vaccinated and they had just told him, like, you got your vaccine too. And he's like, no, I don't wear a mask. They're like, oh, well, we're glad we got both of ours today. And he was
Yeah.
like, shoot, because we had just started learning about vaccine shedding. And
Hmm.
bro, he got like turbo cancer. He was dead in
Wow.
6, 7 months, man. Like just, and
That's terrible.
yeah, yeah, that was bad, man. It was a bad deal. And with it, you know, the winds of change came, you know,
Hmm.
and just, and I'm just a player in all this, man. You know,
Hmm.
I'm just me. And so as the father moves, I try to move with where he's directing me and all these things. And so I got down here, West Virginia, and linked up with Appalachian Families of the Way. And I was, from the very get go, I told them, I was like, it's not a good idea to have any one speaker at one of these groups. And they were like, oh, well, we're hoping, you know, you give a message, you know, here and there or when you can. And I was like, I know. I was like, but it's, you know, we should always be moving back towards the fire.
Yeah.
And because around the fire, just like at any Sukkot, you know, the people are given a voice. And any leader in a community, you know, we have all these ideas of leader and who we want them to be and how they're going to fight our battles for us. But the reality is we got to fight our own battles. We
Yeah.
got to be our own leaders. And the reality is, under the priesthood that's given to us in scripture, every man is priest of his own home underneath Yahshua.
Yeah.
And so every man's got to lead. And if he don't lead, his wife's not going to respect it. His children are going to fall in line. So what's needed is the brotherhood of men. A few good men, dude, a few righteous men. And
Yeah.
righteous, the definition of keeping the Holy Scriptures, man, keeping Torah. And it's none of this theological crap that these guys are into. Like I see all these guys in the movement. I don't even want to name. I'm not going to name names. I don't want to create any controversies for you. But
Hmm.
it's all crap, man. They're sitting in their armchairs studying some kind of theology and trying to reconstruct it for Torah observance. It's bull crap, dude. I
Yeah.
ain't gonna buy it. Nobody should eat from that tree. That's knowledge of good and evil. We need to come back to what is virtuous and what is righteousness. When we try to embody virtue and righteousness, then we're automatically in alignment with the Spirit, because the Spirit is from which all these things descend. All virtue
Hmm.
descends. All standards of righteousness descend.
Yeah.
And so, I'm gonna wrap up some of this conversation, and we can. I don't know. There's so much to talk about, I guess.
There is.
But
That's okay.
I'll wrap up with this story. It's my atheist friend Phil was around the
Hold
fire.
on
I
just
call him by name.
just one
What's that?
second. I'm gonna pause it
Sure.
real quick because I gotta pee. I'll be
Go
right
for it,
back.
dude.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody. You were just gonna tell me about your story about your friend, I think.
Yeah, Phil. So my buddy Phil, it's one of these things. It's like when you keep Torah, right? In trying to understand the applicative sense, like what's required of us as priests, right?
Hmm.
So some people misunderstand me. They think I'm talking about Christianity or churchianity. I'm so far removed from churchianity that I'm not thinking in those terms, but I may
Yeah,
use some of those terms because it's just my
that's what
thinking,
people
what have you.
understand. Yeah.
And I haven't even told you about my mentor. I had a great mentor, man, just a fantastic mentor in my life. But and when it came to Torah, but in that, I'm still figuring out where the rubber meets the road and all of this. And so, but I realized that technically you can circumvent the Torah. And when you work with Jews, and I mean this, people are like, oh, it's just they can take this as anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic. It's just my experience and my evidence and my what I've experienced with that culture.
Hmm.
And when we did large dollar contracts and I had to go negotiate with Jews, bro, no good, man. Like
Yeah.
no good. They're cheats. They're
Yeah.
steals. They do everything in a form of law or in a form of godliness, but no power,
Yeah.
right? And and so we got to be careful about elevating a religion of Judaism on a stage because they
Yeah.
reject the door of salvation, which is Yahshua.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful with that religion. As I see a lot of that in the movement too, is a lot of people
Yeah.
want to elevate this false religion. The religion rejected Yahshua, didn't know it was Yahshua when he's standing right in front of them. So we got to be careful what footsteps we're stepping in here. Okay.
Yeah.
Plus, them people, man, they're cheats and they're not liars. You can't call them a liar, but
Mm.
deception through omission is lying. And
Yeah.
that's what they do. They do deception through omission. And I dealt with them in New York. I dealt with them in New Jersey, Connecticut.
It
And
really seems like because obviously in the Torah it says that you can lend at interest to other people, but
right,
not to your brother, and they
right.
really seem to go hard at that, don't they?
They do. They do. The one guy, he came up to Johnny on a job site once, and he says, "Oh, so you're on the road a lot?" And Johnny's like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." He's like, "So you go into these clubs, you see these women?" And John goes,
What?
John just looks at because John, he looks like a worker, dude, and
Yeah.
he looks at the guy and he goes, "Aren't you the guys that reject Jesus Christ?" So he says to him, and the guy just shrank away, dude. It was
Oh
just like,
man.
oh man, he just gave it to him right there. Here, this guy wanted to hear all this kind of like grotesque stuff about naked women,
Yeah.
because again, he's not breaking Torah. That's just to show you evidence of fact. This guy, they don't break Torah, but they
Hmm.
break Torah. Okay,
Yeah.
and so that's the thing. They didn't break my agreements. They didn't break the law. They broke the spirit of the law, but
Hmm.
the law, they keep the law. Yeah, they don't lie. They don't lie, but they deceive.
Yeah.
So what's the point of a lie? To deceive, right?
Yeah.
So that's and I like them, dude. Don't get me wrong. I like Jews. I like Arabs. I like dealing with them, even in business. Like I like arguing with them, and so, but in all that, just so we understand, you know, that I'm trying to understand all this stuff, and I'm trying to understand what it means that we're going to be quickening spirits,
Hmm.
and I'm trying to understand how to do all things lawful, because I can tell you right now, back when I was burning DVDs, let me just put it to you this way: is that stealing? Technically, I wasn't breaking Torah,
Hmm.
because if you steal a car, the car is no longer in the driveway. But if you make a copy of that car and it never leaves the driveway,
Yeah.
technically you're not stealing. And so
Yeah.
that was the problem with understanding Torah law, is that you can circumvent it
Hmm.
easily done when you have a lot of knowledge of it. But it's the renewal of the mind and renewal of the spirit that's what brings you the balance, because you're not trying to break the letter of the law. You can easily not break the letter of the law, but to not break the spirit of the law,
Yeah.
that's critical. And so
And
we wrestled with,
that was what Christ beef with the Pharisees the most about was they had all of these, they built fences around the Torah and they had all of these ways to get around things. And that was the main thing throughout the Gospels that he beefed with them about.
dude, I'm telling you, man, it's easy. And we do it too. Like my buddy, like we
Hmm.
were working on this business thing, and I was like, bro, like every time we're working together, like, it's getting to a point where we're just pushing, and like we almost, like, I'm not prepared for his coat, and we almost missed, Feast of Trumpets, like, and like maybe we should do this like 10 days before Feast of Trumpets, or 10 days before Sukkot, we have like a miniature Sukkot. And then
Hmm.
like me and him were like talking through it, and then we're like, man, we're doing exactly what religion does. Like we're creating little boundaries and fences to prevent us from not missing the feasts or
Hmm.
whatever. It's like
Yeah.
crazy. Like wow, we're all the way back to around. It's But anyway, so we're going back. We're going back to my fire. We're going back to my boy Phil,
Hmm.
who's sitting there. And Phil, ironically, man, he was in jail on a total trumped up charge. It was a total trumped
Oh
up thing.
no.
It was funny though, because his mom calls me and she's like, Sebi, he's reading his Bible. Like I'm like, because I was like, he's in prison. She's like, yeah, he's reading his Bible. He's running prison Bible study. So here, my buddy is a hardened atheist, gets knocked down a peg because of this Catholic girl I told him he should never have any business with.
Hmm.
Ends up creating a totally trumped up charge. He ends up going to jail. There was no evidence, no nothing. It was all
Oh
verbal. There
no.
was no actual. Dude, it's wild. That's part of the reason I was happy to leave Pennsylvania after that happened. It was just an incredible story on his front. But he's in jail. He was praying, fasting. Now he's out of jail. He's coming to my feast. He's coming to my Sabbath on Friday night,
Oh, that's great.
and he had drank a little bit, and he had a little bit too much liquid courage, and he starts throwing himself this pity party, and he's like, oh, maybe my life would be so much better if I believed in this invisible God would solve all my problems. And he just keeps drinking a little bit, and Johnny's just like looking at me, and I'm looking at John, and John's just like, let him go. And so he's like, yeah, if I believed in skydiving, I mean, he's just going off, like making fun of my beliefs.
Yeah.
And I bit my tongue because I like to answer people, I like to just be a jerk sometimes, and I was like, shoot, man, I'm just gonna sit in my spirit. I'm just gonna sit in my spirit. And I'm gonna let the spirit speak. And I just sat there, dude. I just sat there, my hands on my knees, and finally a word. And the minute I released myself from my own will and letting the spirit speak for me, I turned to my friend Phil and I said, Phil, do you have a voice inside your head that tells you right from wrong? And Phil says, Abadi, 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 what? And I'm like, do you have a
Making a
voice
video,
inside your
Raylan.
I'm like, do you have
You weren't here. Oops.
who's
Sorry.
Raylan?
Sorry. That's
Oh,
my
you're fine.
niece.
Oh,
I thought I had myself muted there.
oh no, it's fine. But anyway, so I was like, do you have a voice inside your head that tells you right from wrong? And he's like, Abadi, 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 what? And I'm like, well, do you have a voice inside your head that tells you right from wrong? And he
Hmm.
goes, yeah. And I'm like, okay. I was like, now you believe in psychiatrists. I said, by the psychiatric institution, if you admitted that to them, they'd put you in a mental asylum, wouldn't they?
Mm.
you said you had voices talking to you inside your head. And he goes, yeah, I guess they would. And because he has no idea where this is going. And I'm like, so you have a voice inside your head that tells you things that are not evolutionarily advantageous.
Mm-hmm.
You have a voice inside your head that tells you to feed the poor. You have a voice inside your head that tells you to do the right thing, even though it doesn't benefit you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, are you aware of that? He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, is there any evolutionary reason why a voice would be in your head telling you to give to the poor, to help people out, to do the right thing, and if you sin against it, holds you in guilt and holds you in contempt? And he's like, I'm like, well, if you want to meet the man who put the voice there, you better start reading his book. And dude, this guy had no words. And my
Oh man.
friend Phil is high IQ. He's one of the smartest guys I know. Dude, I'm telling you, charismatics got it wrong. They talk about slaying in the spirit, bro. I'm telling you, I pierced through him with the truth in a way that he could not. He could, like, pinned.
Yeah.
I took Phil down, and it didn't cost me any intellect. It had nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was all spirit. I was a quickening spirit, bro. I was a quickening spirit because I just relaxed and allowed myself. And the minute I relinquished my will, the spirit came forward and it gave me the words to speak because it says that it will. And I love my boy Phil, and I want to reach my boy Phil, And even my boy Phil now, he's sometimes texts me, he says, help me in my own belief, but even he contemplates these things, And it's just one of those small battles I can share with you guys about, like, why it is so important to come back around the fire, but to come about it in a way that's not your own will.
Yeah.
The fire helps your blood pressure, but it gives you a metronome for peace. Nobody wants to really fight around a fire. And if they do, it's in the beginning and they get it out of them. And then the next thing you know, they want to do is relax with you. They want to mind meld with you as you watch the fire. And so that's what we got to come back to.
That's really true.
Yeah. It's just that ancient way, man, how men preserved the fire, brother, the fire that was within inside us. Now it's, it's a spiritual thing, but it's also so much of a physical environment that we need to also piece back into ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, at the end of the day, David and his mighty men, they sat around a fire. Uriah sat around a fire with his men. That was one of the things that was so critical about that betrayal, is that he knew that his men knew what they were doing when they went back, Like, how could you not know if you were on a crew, if you're running with a wolf pack, if you're running with a squad, that squad, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And so he knew that each and every one of his men betrayed him before he was slayed like that. That was the betrayal of Uriah. He already knew his wife was up to some shady crap.
Yeah.
It was his men, the men that he was with every day, bleeding with, sweating with. That's what he looked back to when they pulled back. And then the enemy came and slew him. That was the biggest part of the betrayal, was his own men. So, in all that, man, I try to be tougher than life, but kinder than love, and my boys, the father sent me my boy Ezekiel, and he comes over now, and he's been helping me do this and that, and we're hoping to get just a bunch of just labor, because here you got all these people talking about community. They want community, right? But nobody talks about work. I'm talking about work. All right, I want to work.
It takes a lot of work.
It takes a lot of work, but the first thing we need to do, the training grounds, is work, right?
Yeah.
So I want to start off simple, right? I was talking to my boy about it. We got some other plans and other things in the mix, and I said, you know what, man? I said, we're gonna keep all those plates spinning. I said, but next spring, we're gonna get a landscaping crew together. We're gonna go back to the basics. We can't get a bunch of Torah observant men to mow freaking lawns. You know what I mean? We can't do that. To forget all these other businesses that we're trying to set up.
Yeah.
But let's start there. Let's start with some young boys. Show them how to work through the business process. Show them how to transact. You know what I mean? Like my daughter, I'm starting with my own kids, bro, my own house. My wife, she knows how to negotiate. My kids know how to negotiate. Negotiation is critical skill.
Yeah.
People talk about this and that about the Torah. What about negotiation? What about the fact that Moses negotiated with Yahweh on top
Yeah.
of the mountain over the lives of the people? I mean,
Yeah.
negotiating is a critical thing. My daughter, she took clay out of the bank there at Sukkot.
Hmm.
She took clay out of the bank and she harvested the clay. She's 9 years old, bro. Just turned 9 in September. She harvested the clay. She made a little bowl. I'm so proud of her, dude. This is a story where I'm like proud about. But she harvested the clay. She made a little bowl, and then she goes around trying to sell this bowl, right? And so here she's like, well, I'm gonna sell it to dad. It's gonna be his coffee mug, you know. I was like, all right. So she sold a number of these little clay pieces that she then painted, you know what I mean? Just
Oh,
incredibly
wow.
talented. Yeah. But I've taught her how to negotiate since she was young. And it's not as like sometimes the relationship can't be as lovey-dovey. Sometimes it is. It's a father trying to teach his daughter life skills that she'll have for the rest of her life. And so
Hmm.
she in front of all these people, man, she's haggling with me over this mug, and she wanted $40, and it was a big mug, and she had actually employed her friend to help her get the clay. So this is a whole enterprise here, and so she wanted the $40, and she owed her friend money. Now her friend was willing to negotiate lower right away, but my daughter still wanted that $40. So for all these people, I'm like, well, let's get the council of the people. Like, so now I got the council of the people in on. So we go to my buddy's fire over in his coat. I'm like passing the mug around, like, hey, what do you think this is worth? I don't know. And now they're trying to be nice to me because they know I got to buy this thing. So they're
Yeah.
like, maybe $15. $15. Ruby's like, no, 40. And then with me, and so she's just driving this hard line negotiation. Dude, it serves her well at 9 years
Yeah.
old to know how to negotiate like that. That's what my 9-year-old can do, right? So my
Hmm.
boy Ezekiel, the way he's going to interact with the world, now he's 23. And he came to me. He became part of one of my online ministries. It's crazy, man. He was part of one of my online ministries, and he's like, he's like, you're too lazy to be a tyrant. So he told me, he's like, but you do hold all the keys. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, but what happens if something happens to you? I was like, well, the ministry dies. And he's like, well, how about we don't do that? Like, what? He's like, will you give it the keys? I was like, yeah, I'll give you the keys. He's like, all right, he's like, well, I was like, but you have to have a sensible plan for
Hmm.
distributing power. I'm not just
Hmm.
going to hand over the keys of the kingdom after we built this whole thing together. I was like, if you wanted the keys way back when, then we should have had a conversation back then. Now we're kind of big. I don't want to change everything up now and screw something up.
Hmm.
And we got a good relationship. He trusts me, I trust him. And so he's like, we should decentralize power because that's what you've been screaming about, forever is
Hmm.
decentralizing power. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, so let's give this person the ability to do these things in power. I said, all
Hmm.
right. So we give that person, dude, I'm not kidding. We give them like that much power, man. And immediately, dude, not even like in a day, immediately it went to their head and
Oh, no,
immediately they abused it. And
man.
immediately we had to take it back. It was
Oh,
like,
no.
dude, it was like one day, bro, one day. And this was a dude we trusted, right?
Yeah.
And so my boy Ezekiel, he's like 22, 23, and he's like, damn, Sebi, he's like, I hate that you're right about that. I was like, bro, I hate that I'm right about that too, you
Hmm.
know. But what happened was that man was never taught how to be a man,
Hmm.
you know. And so we we took a hit in the ministry a little bit because of that one dude just literally within the day, dude, abused it, and but it was
That's
okay because
wild.
he understood the lesson, and the
Hmm.
lesson is that power corrupts, absolutely corrupts.
Hmm.
Power, absolute power corrupts absolutely is the slogan, but just
Hmm.
we're at infant levels of spiritual maturity. We don't know how to operate in that, right? What's worse is that men don't know how to negotiate as men. And so then everything becomes a temper tantrum. When something
Hmm.
doesn't go the way the one guy wants, then it becomes this power struggle, temper tantrum situation rather than handling it the way men should handle it because they've never been demonstrated that because we've become so disconnected because our father's working so many hours at work or
Yeah.
because we've just never been taught proper business. We've never been taught how to negotiate. And so it's like, in all these things, man, it's like pretty wild, but that's my next thing here on the horizon is Appalachian's Family of the Way. 100% is a priority for me, being a part of them. Now we've moved where we decentralized back to the fire. So we're going to have a fire. People are going to be around the fire. We're going to have open discussion. If we don't have the fire, then it's going to be, because we kind of messed up the one. Ironically, I messed it up, but because I always start my fires on Friday. So I said, hey, let's do a fire. They're like, yeah, let's do it. And then here comes Sabbath. And they were like, oh, let's set up a fire, because I was supposed to be there. I wasn't there, and I wasn't thinking, because I always set my fires up Friday. I thought it was just a phenomenal idea. I was not thinking I was going to have, the only thing I was focused on is the work in front of me, man, which I've been cranking out. You'd be proud, brother. I'm going hard, and I was going to cut out this fire ring, and I was going to have it full of kindling and ready to go, so I could just like light a match, and that was my thought process. I had no convictions about it at all, but I worked too hard that week. I got tired, and I told my friends, I said, I'm missing you guys this month. They're like, okay. So then here comes the fire. I'm not there. Somebody's like, hey, you guys talked about a fire all week. So then they went out and they tried to build a fire. One dude ends up axing his leg. I was like, shoot, dude. No, and I'm not there, but they told me about it. I was like, no. And so like, that was my spiritual responsibility, was to provide that, and it's not, you can't light a fire on Sabbath. That's not the command. The command is you cannot kindle a fire. Kindling a fire, people, again, we've lost this. Like, kindling a fire means you got to take a knife, you got to get the wood, and you got to go like this and just flay the wood down until it's smaller and smaller splinters, and then you ignite those splinters. Then you've kindled the fire. Now you have a fire, right? Now you could avoid that by having a rolling fire, and that's what I was kind of intending to do, is either keep a fire contained to a canister or have it, and then it was just, I was going to pull up on a trailer, boom. And but I skipped out. I literally should have gone and chose not to, because I was tired. And some poor dude axed his own leg, which I don't know. I hope he's doing all right. I think he's doing okay. But it's one of those things, man. It's like, wow, like, that was a bad influence. Like, I should have thought that through, But in all that, man, it's growing pains. That community is growing. It's huge, huge. There's so many people being added on every time I go. It's once a month, and every time we go there, dude, they're just growing in the right spirit of things, man. Like, these are good guys, good people, and
that's great.
There's so much to it, brother. Like, there's so many people in that community that think that it's possible that West Virginia might be one of those places where we run to the mountains, and one of the things that came out of that community is the argument that Yahweh won't judge a region if there was 10 righteous men, because that whole discussion. It's just there's so many exciting things that are going on, brother. I don't know what to tell you, but I guess we'll have to leave it at that. I've talked for quite a bit, and I hope that was beneficial.
That was great.
You think so? And but yeah, if you guys can just keep me in prayer. I'm hoping to launch a business this spring. I'm hoping to put young guys back to work, man, and
that's a great idea.
And so that's the thing, everyone wants this community, and in their mind it's communism, because they're like, we're going to share all things like the New Testament church. No. I'm all about the New Testament church. I'm not about people sharing things unless they want to share them. Okay. And what I'm mostly about is getting everybody their own property and their own place to set their feet and their own house built. And from there, we can talk. Now they're in a position that they can share. Right. So let's get these guys homes. Let's get our homes built up. Let's get sheds built, RVs for the homeless going. Let's get all those things in motion. Free ourselves from this debt system. Get our money into real money. Remember, Yahweh says, I talked to Christians, so Yahweh says, the gold is mine, the silver is mine. So we got to move our money into real currency. That produces. I've had gold and silver produce for me in these years. And in the last couple months, man, big numbers, I haven't seen them, but I've seen big numbers in gold and silver. So I recommend it. But, in all these things, man, it's like, at the end of the day, I've heard of this one community, and I don't want to speak ill of any of these different communities, but I hear these things about these communities. It's like, hey, you come here and now you're in control of one guy who owns all the property, and he
Mm.
determines what's up and what's down, and if it's sun or whatever, and you've given up all your property, move there. And these folks, some of them too sheltered to understand what's happening until they learn a very bitter lesson. And there's actually a lot of brothers and sisters that know me on my Facebook that know me that are like, yo, I lost everything to a cult. I didn't know it
Mm.
was a cult.
Mm-hmm.
It was like me and you talking,
Mm-hmm.
they were our brothers. They went to Sabbath with us every Saturday. We loved them. And then we sold everything. And then next thing you know, this argument was made and we gave them the money and now they have everything now that, and dude, I'm telling you, I've heard stories, bro, for another day, man. I've heard
Yeah.
stories of chill your blood. It chill
Yeah.
your blood, man. And now I've it's one of those things. See, I take all my burdens, right? And like I said, I do grieve every day, because I just can't as a human being, just can't. But I realize that when you have a burden and you give it up to Joshua, if you doubt it and you doubt that he'll hold it for you, he'll just give it right back because he's your older brother. So you just say, all right, brother, you don't believe I took this from you, or I can take this for you, or hold this for you, or bear this burden for you. All right, you're going to learn, younger brother. Now it's back on you. And so you
Mm-hmm.
got to take these burdens, man, just put them back on Joshua and just say, Joshua, I need you to carry these things for me for a while. But um, that's what I'm about, man. I want the communities to carve their way back to wealth and
Yeah.
greatness and wealth, as in the definition of the Torah, which is an extension of your home, your
Mm-hmm.
family, your livestock. I remember the day that it hit me, I was like, I'm such a fool. I don't have livestock for Yahweh to multiply. How is he going to
Yeah.
multiply my livestock? I got to go get livestock. So I went and bought goats, which was
Mm.
probably possibly not the best idea when your wife is pregnant with your second child, but that's what I did. Baby goats, man. These little baby goats. Bam. And in many ways, man, all he's done is multiply these things in my
Mm.
life. And so I'm just eternally grateful and happy to be here, my man. And I'm gonna let you go. And
Happy to have you here.
and
Thank you.
thank you for anybody. Thank you for having me. Thank anybody for listening. And of course, I'm reachable. You guys can find me, and of course, you can reach me anytime, my man. All right, I'll catch you later. Shalom.
Thank you. Shalom.
Yep.